Welcome, welcome. It's here. Freddie Leroy debate day. Welcome, welcome. Oh, there I am on another tab. Now, this debate, I've got a Zoom link for it. We didn't get the video working from Zoom the other day, but we got the audio. So we'll see what we can do today. It says scheduled for 9 o'clock, so it's not open yet. Hey Tone, hey Bretta, thanks for joining. You know, I wondered if anybody would join this stream, because it's kind of the opposite time of day to when I usually stream, but good to see you guys. Let's take a look. I know what we can watch this morning. Oh, hey, look at this. There's a short that I'm in. 3 months ago, 2 views. Oh no.
But more often than that, it seems to be, you know, usually the game is not actually lying and saying incorrect facts, but rather it's just saying a bunch of things that are technically true around some sort of conclusion that you want to get to without ever actually saying the conclusion. So best example of this, and the main, like, I'll say junk science that I go after, is this thing called the Dublin Declaration, which is a document written to give the vibe that we don't need to reduce global meat consumption, and has sign-on from over 1,000 scientists, but it doesn't ever actually claim that. It just has all of these things about, my favorite phrase in there, it has this phrase, animal foods are a source of essential nutrients. Now that sentence is true, right? But it doesn't say animal foods are an essential source of nutrients. They are a source of essential nutrients because they do have protein in them, but they're not, and you don't have to eat animal. That's such a silly point if you think about it. I mean, the gravel on my driveway is a source of essential nutrients, has calcium in it, right? It's like, it's such a nothing point. But so the whole document is like a series of, 100 sentences like that, back to back, that is designed to give the vibe that meat consumption is all fine. We don't.
Yeah, no, this wasn't the smoothest that I've expressed that, but basically that is my criticism of the Dublin Declaration. And we read it on stream. It's quite short. This is it. We read this on stream, and exactly as I said there, it's a bunch of very deliberately crafted, very misleading phrases. And as you'll see, there's actually empirical evidence that this is misleading. So the debate this morning is about the Dublin Declaration, guys. I'm not in the debate, I should say, but I'm going to be watching it. It's Frederic Leroy who's the author of this pro-meat paper, the Dublin Declaration, and Iryna Herzon, who's one of the lead authors of a paper critiquing it. The lead author of one of the many papers critiquing it, I should say. So let's have a look if they have a precise definition or a precise moat that they're debating. Here's the page for the event. The Dublin Declaration of Scientists on the Societal Role of Livestock has sparked fierce debate in European and global agriculture. especially as the livestock industry and its critics vie to shape the future of food systems. Presented by leading experts from both sides, this webinar discusses the credibility and impact of the declaration on science, policy, and the livestock sector. I think this is probably as close as we'll get to a specific point. If you want to have a look in more detail at the Dublin Declaration, by the way, it's here at dublindeclaration.org. Dr. Iryna Herzon, who's published academic pieces 1 and 2, challenged the declaration, argued that the declaration undermines transparency and the integrity of scientific contributions to policy. Yeah, I would agree with that. Undermine scientific integrity, that's a very good critique. The whole thing here is an exercise in misdirection and misleading. I'll show you some of the details of the paper that empirically establishes the Dublin Declaration as misleading shortly. Professor Frederic Leroy, a co-author of the Declaration, will share the rationale behind the creation of the Declaration and defend the need for a more nuanced and inclusive debate on the role of livestock. Yeah, so essentially what they're looking to do is give the vibe that there's enough uncertainty and enough some pros and some cons that we really don't need to be reducing livestock numbers, we really don't need to be reducing meat consumption. It's totally misleading, their whole approach. I'm really hopeful, and I'll say quietly optimistic, that Iryna Herzon's going to be able to call this out effectively. My main fear for this debate is that it's going to be a bit polite for my taste. I mean, this guy is absolutely in bad faith. We watched a few of his best bits the other week, where he kind of gives the game away and says, yeah, this is just communication for the meat industry. And I think that really changes the nature of the discussion compared to if it really was two good faith scientists trying together to come to the correct conclusion. So it will be an exercise in rhetoric, I think, for a large part, but we'll see. So we've got key themes here. Key themes: what the Dublin Declaration asserts about livestock nutrition and sustainability, concerns about selectivity and polarisation, the importance of open, multidisciplinary discussion, science as advocacy. Yeah, this is what the Dublin Declaration is, in my view. So this is interesting. They've got the first point is, what does the Dublin Declaration actually claim? And I think this is an important one because, like I say, they are unlikely to have any incorrect claims or just straight out wrong statements. But what they've done is organised it in a way to give the impression of some conclusions that they want to point towards but can't actually support. Let's find the high-powered study, Dublin Declaration. Misleading. Here it is. So this is a study. What they did, so this is actually a follow-up paper. They wrote a first paper pointing out some of the ways in which the Dublin Declaration's misleading. Damn, Humphrey. That's a real shame, yeah. I sense that a lot of people in the vegan community regard Sam Harris well overall and like his general vibe. And I do, you know, he's a big guy whose podcast I would always listen to and so on. But yeah, he's just not got the sauce on this issue, hey. So these guys pointed out in a 2024 paper, we analysed the content of the Dublin Declaration using a framework developed by Claire et al., who thematically analysed documents disseminated by organisations representing the UK meat industry. They identified 4 discursive framing devices that shape ideas about meat and livestock are conveyed to readers. We found the Dublin Declaration to align with three of these frames, e.g., the idea that we should keep eating meat to be healthy, and identified an additional frame not covered by Claretel's framework. So they've looked at this 2022 framework and found that it aligns with many of the Dublin Declaration's frames. And now here's where it gets interesting. In their letter, Belcatel, these are Dublin Declaration authors, advanced that we falsely claimed that the Declaration adheres to the frames that we had identified. On the website they link to, they add that the Declaration nowhere makes or even implies the statement that one should specifically keep eating meat to be healthy. So when these guys accused them of advancing misleading talking points, they don't try to defend those talking points, right? These are the cutting edge pro meat scientists who have all come together to write a pro meat paper, and they are not able to say, yes, we support that point and you actually do need meat to be healthy. Instead, they hold up their hands and they say, we didn't say that, we didn't even imply that. We would never say that. So they are not defending these frames, right? They are walking away. They're not making any attempt to actually defend these frames. And so then the contention becomes, does the Dublin Declaration actually imply these things? They say Declaration nowhere makes or even implies the statement that one should keep eating meat to be healthy, and that the same can be said for the other three frames. Fortunately, which ideas the Declaration effectively conveys, and therefore which frames the Declaration might align with, is a matter one can approach empirically. So these guys did a survey. Let's see some details on this. So basically they list the frames in contention, and they ask people to agree to disagree to what extent they get this impression from reading the Dublin Declaration. We need to keep eating meat to be healthy. Meat is good for health. We should eat some meat to be in good health. Right, to what extent do people agree with these, was the question. And again, the authors of the Dublin Declaration have said, we didn't even mean to imply that. So these are not claims that they are trying to defend scientifically. They're just saying, we never said that. So about 500 people, looks like. And here's the results. Does the Dublin Declaration convey the following ideas directly or indirectly? So blue is the proportion of respondents who said yes, the document does convey these ideas. Red is the proportion who said no, it doesn't. And grey is neither. And as you can see, for most of these statements in contention, where the author said, we didn't say that or even imply that, the overwhelming majority find that yes, it did convey that frame. So, in other words, you're looking at empirical proof that the Dublin Declaration is misleading. There really are not very many documents that you can say this about. And by the way, they have these control statements as well, right? So you can see these are about, what are these? The industrialization of animal agriculture has significant downsides. Many scientists and scientific institutions are advising meat reductions in wealthy countries. Okay, so these are sort of anti-meat statements. And here you have majority saying no, the Dublin Declaration did not convey this. And only a sliver of people saying that it did. So this is to Freddie's claim about the Dublin Declaration being a very balanced declaration. They absolutely know what they're doing with this. They are being unbelievably dishonest. It's really shocking. It really is shocking. This is their website. This is their rebuttals page, where they say, we didn't mean this, we didn't even imply it. And it is so impotent. They just don't have... They're just wrong. They're just wrong, right? Here's the proof. Empirical proof that the Dublin Declaration is misleading. That it does advance all of these frames, and that the authors, when called out on this, made no attempt at all to actually defend these frames. Again, these are the best minds in science on the pro-meat side, and they must have asked around. They must have said, well, can we make these claims, right? If we can, we want to try to point to some evidence that you need meat to be healthy, that meat's good for health, and need some meat to be in good health, and so on. They will have asked around. There will have been email chains about this. If it was happening today, there would have been ChatGPT requests about this. And they could not come up with any evidence to defend these claims. So instead they just say, no, we didn't even imply that. Only to, by the way, almost immediately, these guys must have had this paper already written, because it came out almost immediately, only to have it empirically proven that yes, they did advance these claims. So really embarrassing for the Dublin Declaration crowd. And yeah, I really hope that Herzon does a good job of exposing it today. I'm going to stick on my overview. The debate's starting at 9 o'clock. So the debate's in 9 minutes. I'm in the Zoom call waiting room. But let's watch my Dublin Declaration criticism just to get warmed up here.
Hi, my name's Chris Bryant. I'm a scientist and I'm the lead author of this paper criticising the infamous Dublin Declaration. The Dublin Declaration is a misleading document written by meat industry executives and used by meat industry lobbyists to trick policymakers into thinking that there's no need for us to reduce our meat consumption in developed countries, despite an abundance of scientific evidence to the contrary. Essentially, the Dublin Declaration focuses almost entirely on livestock in the developing world and in agroecological systems. These are two categories which are far easier to defend, but which account for a
yeah, checkmate, Bretta. Checkmate, vegans. Wash your face? Checkmate.
tiny proportion of all livestock. Obviously, meat consumption in developed countries and meat production on factory farms account for almost all of the world's actual meat. On this article in the meat industry publication Beef Central, I commented pointing out 3 papers which explain why the Dublin Declaration is misleading. Beef Central edited my comment to add, "in my opinion." I did not write that. Moreover, that's actually not just my opinion. There's now empirical evidence that the Dublin Declaration...
Yeah, by the way, they also added this comment. Beef Central has found some glaring inaccuracies and mistruths in these reports. We'll circle back for some closer scrutiny later, editor. Which has not happened. This is mental that they added this to my comment on their story, but okay.
My opinion is misleading, and that's not something you can say for that many documents.
Yes, Esmar, welcome.
Not only that, they added this note saying that there are glaring inaccuracies and mistruths in the reports that are linked, and promising to circle back for some closer scrutiny later. Well, later never came, here we are 4 months later, and now I thought I'd return the favour. Since you guys were so eager to weigh in on my comment to point out glaring inaccuracies and mistruths, I'm sure you won't mind if I do the same with this Beef Central interview with the lead Dublin Declaration author, Professor Frederic Leroy. Let's take a look how he handles this question about criticism of the Dublin Declaration.
So typically if criticism against the Dublin Declaration or against similar initiatives or scientific communication comes out, typically it will boil down to discrediting the scientists by insinuating that their science is biased because of industry affiliations or industry funding. I want to stress that the Dublin Declaration is an independent initiative coming from independent scientists. There has been no funding whatsoever from industry or influence over what we're doing by industry. And in the end, the only argument we ever hear is that scientists that come with a pro-livestock message that emphasize the benefits of livestock, that they, almost by definition, would be corrupted scientists. That's very problematic, and it's also very insulting, as a matter of fact, and unacceptable. But we hardly ever hear scientific arguments. we never get
I'm
scientific comments, specific scientific comments on what is wrong in what we're saying. If you read the Dublin Declaration, and if you actually take the time to read through it, it's not a long document to begin with, and it's a very balanced declaration. It's a declaration that argues that food systems need to change, that livestock systems need to change. But it also says that livestock systems are absolutely essential if you want to have a sustainable food system. And I don't see how that could be a controversial idea. And people that say that it's a problematic declaration, well, they would have to point out which exact sentence in that declaration is problematic, and then we can have a further discussion.
Yes, you heard that right. The lead author of the Dublin Declaration explicitly denies any influence from the meat industry when every single one of the lead authors was entrenched in the industry. Now, it's true that conflicts of interest can exist.
My cuts are not quite so good in these early videos, eh?
And they don't automatically make your research findings invalid. But these guys failed to disclose their conflicts of interests, and were even explicitly denying conflicts of interests until they were discovered by investigative journalists. Professor Leroy is also very pleased to tell us that there has been no scientific critique of the Dublin Declaration. There has in fact been at least 5 published scientific critiques of the Dublin Declaration, although to be fair, many of these have come out since Professor Leroy gave this interview. Now, the Dublin Declaration people like to point to the rebuttals page on their website, where they have now responded to some of the criticisms that I showed, although they don't really tackle the central issues of those critiques. Moreover, when I searched for a response to my own critique, they have not provided one.
Still,
Professor Leroy says that
people that say that it's a problematic declaration, well, they would have to point out which exact sentence in that declaration is problematic, and then we can have a further discussion.
since my critique of the Dublin Declaration came out, I've tagged Professor Leroy and the Dublin Declaration in several posts on LinkedIn. He even viewed my profile, so he has definitely seen my criticisms. I would love to have a scientific discussion with Professor Leroy about the Dublin.
this is pre-Leroy blocking me and avoiding me forever, when I still thought that this was something that might conceivably happen. To be honest, I'm shocked that he's agreed to the debate that he's doing today, but if he ever agrees to debate me, I will, I don't know what I'll do. Suggestions in chat.
And Declaration and the role of livestock in society. Reach out to me and we can set it up. I'm sure lots of people would like to see that. For now, I think that this short video is enough to demonstrate to most people that the Dublin Declaration is misleading junk science. Anybody who claims that the Dublin Declaration gives any defence of the vast majority of meat and livestock products that are actually consumed in the real world has either been successfully misled or is being knowingly dishonest. Cheers. If you found this useful and you want to see more short videos debunking
Look at this janky old end screen as well.
misinformation from the meat industry, you can follow me here at these links.
I was I was literally making these in Paint at the time. Yeah, my brother's sorted me out there, so my production quality's gone up a little bit. Hopefully my mic sounds better now than it did then as well. Right guys, I'm in this Zoom waiting room. I guess it's a webinar that I'm joining. Yeah, I wish I'm free. I don't think it's ever going to happen, unfortunately. I wonder who the moderator is. Barbara Machado. Environment journalist, you're active. Hey. I know you're active. Posting about renewables, okay, based. Alright, we shouldn't do too much we shouldn't do too much prejudging of the mod in this debate. Good to know though, good to know. Always good to know that sort of thing. Right, this should be starting any minute. Let me change the screen share to this one. Here we go. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this debate. It's about time somebody got to debate Freddie on the Dublin Declaration. My only concern is I think it's probably going to be very polite, and that will come at the expense of directness potentially. But we'll see. Oh yeah, I watched some of that, Humphrey. I watched some of that review that Avi posted. It must suck being like a public intellectual type and not being vegan. Because you just have a massive area that you pretty much know you're wrong about and have to contort arguments to try and defend. Right, it's 1 minute past and this hasn't started yet, so I'm a little bit concerned that this has been changed, or that I've got the wrong link or something. Let me have a look here.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody.
There
We
go.
are almost starting. We are just waiting a few more seconds to see if more people join. Okay, numbers are rising.
Okay, I can't be heard at all on the call. That's good. I was holding my breath because I was like, can they hear me? Oh, vey. All right, let's. Yeah, that's not showing up properly, is it? I don't know why it doesn't want to share the actual Zoom window. Let me see if I can fix it if I make it whole screen instead. Oh, that works. There they
Okay,
are. There he
I
is.
think we can
Old
start.
Freddy.
So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this discussion on scientific advocacy and the Dublin Declaration. This webinar is hosted by Pathways, which is a new funded project whose main purpose is to identify and increase sustainable practices along the supply and production chains of European livestock sector. And so this project really strives to reduce environmental impacts whilst addressing societal demands for nutritious and affordable meat and dairy products. And this is why we are here today, because in order to chart a common path for transition, it is important not only to take into account all the factors and demands at play, but above all, the scientific evidence. And today we will listen to the voices of experts who have different perspectives on the role of livestock in society and try to understand in a constructive way the challenges that need to be overcome in order to find common grounds. And the starting point of this discussion is the Dublin Declaration on the Societal Role of Livestock, a document from 2022 signed by over 1,000 scientists, which asserts that meat, dairy, and eggs are crucial to people's diet by providing essential nutrients, environmental benefits, and thus arguing against calls to eliminate animal source foods. However, the declaration also sparked criticism from scientists as well, who claimed that the document is misleading, that it was written by authors with industry ties as a tool to lobby against EU environment and health policies, that it downplays negative impacts of the industrial livestock production, and also an important point for today's discussion, that it undermines scientific rigor and transparency. But to understand both sides of this discussion, we have with us today Professor Frederic Leroy, co-author of the Dublin Declaration, food scientist and advocate for livestock societal value, and Dr. Iryna Herzon, senior lecturer and published critic of the Declaration, expert in sustainability and conservation science. My name is Barbara Machado. I'll be your moderator today. I'm a European journalist. And I think we can get started. And first, I would like to give the floor to Professor Frederic, which will be followed by comments from Dr. Iryna and her perspective. And then we will have about half an hour of discussion, during which our audience can also engage.
It's a live Zoom call, so
those listening to us today, you can also ask questions in the chat box. And yeah, very excited for this discussion today. So please, Professor Frederic, I would like to know what are the main messages that Declaration wanted to pass, what's its core
we'd
aim.
Love to know.
So the floor is yours to present the Declaration.
Thank you very much. I hope this is on screen now.
Oh, this guy's slides.
Can you just confirm, Barbara, you see my slides? Yes, sir?
Sorry, I see your screen. Yes, everything.
Okay, perfect. Right. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk about the Dublin Declaration and present its main ideas and purpose. So for ease of discussion, I copy-pasted the declaration on a few slides. It's not that long. It's rather concise document. And I will
look how he's underlined
through
the part that I said they've
paragraphs and highlight a few of
that's the
its
one
main
point. Many
ideas. I will
improvements
not read the declaration. You can do that in your own time, but I will just pick out some of the
let me just cherry pick from this
sentences that are interesting for the upcoming discussion. So why was the declaration made? As you can read in the paragraph, at the end of this paragraph, the declaration had the purpose to give voice to many scientists around the world who researched diligently, honestly, and successfully in the various disciplines to achieve a balanced view of the future of animal agriculture. And it has basically served as a counter reaction to what we see as disproportionate anti-livestock sentiment in public discourse. With the comment, and this is a comment that triggered quite a bit of hostility, with the comment that livestock systems are too precious to society to become the victim of simplification, reductionism, or zealotry. Now, we are not seeing ghosts. We do indeed see lots of statements out there that are excessive in the way they condemn livestock. And I've put a few examples on the right of the screen. I will not talk about all of those, but you'll find plenty of examples in both scientific literature, on social media, and then you even, for instance, I'll take one. You have the UNEP site, United Nations Environment Program. You'll find one of the articles on their website stating that the world's most urgent problem is meat. Now, that's clearly something that I would expect not even people within UNEP to be supportive of, but nonetheless, that ends up on their website. You see a reference to the Eat Lancet document. So that's the first version, a very recent.
There's a bunch of problems coming from meat, clearly.
Last week, but in the first version, there's an explicit reference in Key Recommendation 5 to red meat as being an unhealthy food and mentioned in the same sentence as sugar. Initiatives like C40 City have set what they call an ambitious target for 2030. Setting the meat and dairy consumption in some of the major global cities to 0 kilograms. Now, these are the kind of examples that we think are counterproductive to society for a number
livestock. Well, he's the pro-livestock industry guy. Yeah,
I'm just struggling a bit.
I see what you mean there, Brett.
Camera. Right. So then, so in the previous slide, we clearly also want to point out. I mean, we want to be very explicit about it. we are not arguing for status quo at all. We're not saying livestock systems can get a free pass. We should just increase meat production. That's not at all what we're saying.
That is advanced by their frames, though, as we saw.
Talk about a double challenge, unprecedented indeed. We have a massive pressure coming from population increases, resource depletions, and so forth.
Again, look how this other side is really
Coupled to the
buried
fact
in the
that
middle of the
today
paragraph there.
and for the
Really not the
foreseeable
main
future,
point of
some
their
methods
paper.
and scale of animal production systems will put a lot of pressure on several outcomes, including biodiversity, climate change, nutrient flows, and also come with a concern for animal health and welfare, and all of that grouped under the umbrella of the One Health approach. So the challenges are clear. The challenges have been recognized. On the right side, you
That's
see
really,
the pathways
I don't know what it
document
means,
from
though.
the FAO, similarly looking for those challenges and ways to resolve them. We can only face those challenges and only overcome them if we're going to use the evidence-based approaches with the most robust methodologies and paths forward. The declaration then goes on with a few sections talking about what we could see as the three pillars of discussion. The first one is human health. This declaration is clear on this. We find that the regular consumption of meat, dairy, and eggs, and you could add fish. We must talk about terrestrial animals, but we also could take into account fish. As part of well-balanced and well-formulated diets are advantageous for human beings. And we do identify a lot of...
They deny claiming that you need meat to be healthy. They did not try to defend that claim.
Take the position of animal source foods and fill in the same, and tick the same boxes. The Dublin Declaration in 2022 was followed in 2024 with a Denver call for action. So after the Dublin summit we organized, there was also a Denver summit. And the Denver call for action builds on this and calls for nourishment-oriented policies with the remark that the very widespread discreditation nowadays of animal source foods must cease so that we can have proper and more balanced evaluations of their role in nourishment and healthy diets. The second section, of course, is the environment. That's a very crucial one.
Must stop.
The declaration refers to a couple of benefits of including animals in the food system. Now, you can talk all you want, of course, about the detrimental effects. Again, that's being acknowledged, but we also have to factor in the fact that livestock brings in...
Hey, BPM, good to see you. Thanks for joining.
A reference to the valorization of resources that are otherwise difficult to valorize, and that has to do with land use, and it has to do with byproducts of crop agriculture, inedible biomass, and so forth, and then a whole range of ecosystem services, carbon sequestration, soil health, biodiversity, and so forth. That, of course, is depending on the management of the livestock systems, and I do agree that the reference to well-managed livestock systems, the well-managed part, carries a lot of weight, and that's something that indeed will need our full attention and full investment. And the declaration in that way is absolutely making the call to improve management systems worldwide. However, it's also saying that the one-size-fits-all kind of solutions where we just decimate livestock herds, or some people go as far as eliminating livestock from the system, that will come also with the consequential loss of all the benefits and would make things probably worse. So the Denver call for action in that matter calls for recognition of the system complexities. Whenever you're going to change the system fundamentally, you're going to have a very complex response, and that again needs careful deliberation from the scientific side of things. The third pillar is the socio-economical one. Livestock, besides the purely nutrition.
These slides are unbelievable, the way he's highlighting the cherry-picked bits that we went through on stream just the other week. It's so transparent.
But we have to think about clothing and power, manure, employment, income, social aspects, the foundational contribution to rural communities worldwide, financial capital, There are gender effects that have been very well documented also in an FAO document a couple of years ago. And currently, so the paragraph also ends then with a reference to with a statement highlighting.
Yeah, if we reduce meat consumption, it might be sexist.
Performance across all of the dimensions of health, environment, and socioeconomics is nowadays proceeding. It's proceeding faster than ever in history, and essentially, the way we're dealing with the food systems offers lots of reasons to believe that we can make the best of it. So opposed to this view where we are saying that, look, we start from something that has been valuable and always has been valuable to human civilizations, rather than trying to dismantle that, we think we can improve this. Other voices, such as George Monbiot, would say that we have to get rid of the conventional ways of farming, even if we try to improve them through science, and we have to switch to other food systems that are radically different, which then for him would be precision fermentation. You have influential think tanks like Rethinks saying that the industry will collapse by 2030 and we will have new systems in place, food as software, 3D printing, and so forth and so on. Those are, of course, very radical points of view. So we have a spectrum here, obviously, but I would like to make the audience understand that we are dealing with solutions in a certain spectrum of ideas. The declaration ends with the outlook for livestock, where the statement is that livestock is the millennial-long proven method to create healthy nutrition and secure livelihoods.
Herzon nails him.
And it refers to it as a wisdom deeply embedded in cultural values everywhere. And this, once more, is opposed to the idea that we can just have a Control-Alt-Delete function and start all over again with a newly designed food system. Because of all the great challenges that we've seen, because of sometimes the asymmetry in some of those debates, we are calling for scientific discussions. We're also calling for standards of evidence that need to be in place if we start those discussions, because obviously in any side of this debate, you can take any position and you can always come up with some sort of evidence or some sort of argumentation. I think we have to respect the scientific method, contrast those different points of view as much as we can, and come to certain common grounds, which I'm certain we will find, and I'm certain I would also be able to identify with my partner in the conversation today, and then resolve and take position on the differences that probably we will not be attuned in, but always through respectful and open scientific confrontation. Talking about confrontation, we've had a lot of pushback, and the pushback has ranged from very cheap attacks, accusing us of being a voice for big meat and big dairy and whatever you want. So you see also here on top an article coming from a activist journalist hub called Sentient, and they say simply, well, 1,000 scientists who signed the declaration are not impartial, and it's full of animal industry bias.
Any pushback on that?
And then we have the more constructive debates, and I'm happy to acknowledge
any actual denial of that, or just
again have my partner in conversation here today, because I think at least this has the merit of having a constructive attempt at opening that conversation, which we certainly welcome. The Dublin Declaration has been signed by, and I'm almost finishing, the Dublin Declaration has been signed by about 1,200 scientists. Some of those scientists work together with industry.
Another beauty, by the way.
They are, most of them probably are animal scientists, not exclusively, but there are indeed a lot of animal scientists involved. A lot of them will work with the industry. I do not personally, but I don't think that's necessarily the problem.
That's a lie.
There's a quote here from Frank Mitloehner.
That's a lie. He does work with the livestock industry.
He's lying. The declaration, where he talks about a specific issue and the fact that he is actually paid by his university to work together with the stakeholders in the industry and to help them to achieve a better environmental performance, which anyway they will have to reach in the upcoming years and decades. And with this, I'll stop my presentation and give back the word to you, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Professor Frederic. Dr. Iryna, what are your thoughts on what was just presented? What would you like to add? The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you, Barbara, and the whole project for inviting me, and Frederic for a small introduction into my response. I think I will start with a little bit background of my own kind of personal academic position in this. So I'm an agroecologist, and for 30 years I've been working very much with livestock systems that have very special values, very much of what is described in Dublin Declaration. So high nature value farmlands, for example, across Europe. So the traditional systems that are based on extensive pastoralism and associated with many ecosystem services that I evoked in this declaration. And actually, about 10 years ago, I moved to live on a farm that has such pastoral system and grows beef according to agroecological principles and organic, etc. Very big cultural values. And so I have 300 cows behind my windows, but as a scientist, I'm also very well aware about the accumulated impact of, was it 1.6 billion cows that are at the moment we have about 30 billion chicken. So, taking this small local system that works and trying to put it in a global perspective is something on my mind, and I worked with that. I'm saying it simply to underline that I have a very good position to appreciate the many benefits of livestock. That's where I come from. I also have experience with policy work, and I know that often we have one solution that doesn't fit every context and every system. And Frederic, you evoked this in the Dublin Declaration, and I really hope we'll
she's going to
discuss
grant a
this.
lot
So
of
in
the
what
agroecological
context,
stuff
within
off the
what
bat,
system,
and then
and
she's
at
going
what
to talk about
scope we can call
the
something
wider
as
defence of the
sustainable.
industrial system.
And next, as an ecologist, agroecologist, I work a lot with like food system level with people with other disciplines. And so something that I guess we all learned is that we have to be able to measure sustainability. So, for example, if we speak about agroecological or say organic production, can it feed the world? So these are numerical things that we have to do, arithmetics in order to say that it's robust evidence. The same goes for an improvement A in, say, broiler production. So to what
Put some
extent
numbers
it
on
can help us to reach the goal on sustainability.
Dublin
So this
Declaration is
is
all
numerical
vibes.
realism that I also want to discuss today.
Numerical
And yes,
realism,
Frederic, when
nice.
I really saw the declaration for the first time and the way you entered it, what was give voice to many scientists who work in this around the world in various disciplines, achieve a balanced view on the future of animal systems, I felt like, wow, that's the way to go. As an
She laughed when she
agroecologist
said
also,
balanced.
I was very pleased it was mentioned so clearly. But then when I read the declaration, I must admit I was quite disappointed because I thought, well, what I saw was not in any way a balanced view on the issue.
True, get him.
And sort of to evoke specific the best practices and say that this is the whole production in which we operate in the modern world, I think is not a realism of which we talk here. And so the main message of Dublin Declaration, Barbara, is not, as you put it, sort of, how to say, that it's against the elimination of livestock. Actually, the Dublin Declaration gives a message to people that reducing animal consumption or production is not necessary or even helpful to sufficiently limit the environmental impact of the whole system. And we have an independent study that shows exactly this. And what was even more disturbing, that the associated paper in Nature that was based on the Dublin Declaration then arrives at even more astounding statement that says that we need to expand the sector in order to address the issues of the humanity. And this is again something that I want to focus on today. So what I want, I guess, to say is that the response of people like myself and then about 50 other academics because it's not only not only the Guardian who criticized the Dublin Declaration and not my personal blog in the table. There were at least 5 academic pieces of writing to which, Frederic, you didn't, I think, write. I can send you all 5 links that from different perspective looked at Dublin Declaration and
She's
went
getting
and
him.
scrutinized it on the best evidence we have. And as I say, there were like 50 scientists with variety of disciplines indeed, from climate research to nutrition and health, social policies, etc.
She's being more direct than I feared
and
she might.
I think many of them exactly work with food system level, and they model and build scenarios to see what is realistic. So it's not like beyond my opinions or my liking or disliking of cows or chicken, really, that I came into this process. It's basically my awareness about the scope of literature that works with sustainability of livestock, and also all the major reports. You mentioned one, but we have EPBES, we have IPCC, we have FAO reports, and many other reports that all arrive at the same conclusion based on the best evidence we have and robust models that reduction of the livestock is the only way we realistically can have it sustainable in our food systems and feed the world and try address the problems. And even that is a big challenge indeed. So, and I thought when I read the declaration, was it 3 years ago, I somehow thought in my naivety that we have a certain academic consensus about what needs to be done. Not individual voices that say like, let's stop the livestock altogether and jump to new technology 100%. But as an academic community, that the majority of research that we have demonstrates sufficiently well the scope of the challenges and also the need for the reduction. But it seems that I was wrong, and so
How is he
therefore I
nodding
really
to that?
welcome the
He can't agree with
discussion.
that. That was pretty
Thank
good
you so
opening from
much,
Herzon.
Dr. Iryna. So let's try to
Joke.
break some of these points down and understand better your both of your
Lot comes down
perspectives.
to the
So
mod.
maybe giving the word to Professor Frederic. I would like to first bring to this discussion also the most recent EAT Lancet Commission report written by over 70 scientists, which was also mentioned by Professor Frederic, stating that, so bringing new evidence, stating that the adoption of a plant-rich diet with modest consumption of meat could prevent 40,000 early deaths today. And this new edition explicitly asks for cuts in annual populations of ruminants, of non-ruminants, and it doesn't completely eliminate red meat from one's diet, but recommends 1 serving of red meat per week, slightly more for chicken and fish, and 250 grams of dairy. And so, bearing this in mind, I would like to ask Professor Frederic that in this declaration and other essays of yours, you advocate for a regular meat consumption. And so, using this report as a starting point, I'd like to ask if you would be open to a reform to the system that cuts meat production and reduces meat intake in these terms. So, just a few small portion a week. Would this, in your view, as a nutrition expert, would this, in your view, fulfill nutritional needs? Or is this not regular enough? And what is regular enough? Is it a challenge still to measure this? What do you think?
Well, so we have to be careful here when we refer to my positions or the Dublin Declaration positions, which are not necessarily going to be the same thing. I'm one voice within a community here of more than 1,000 scientists. So I'll try to speak on behalf of the Dublin Declaration manifesto at that higher level. We'll have lots of different views within the community of Dublin signatories about what the appropriate amount of meat would be and so forth. also about whether or not we have to reduce to certain degrees. You will find all sorts of different numbers. If you would do a survey within that community, you will have people that will advocate actually very substantial, probably reductions, and you will probably have some others that think we can go forward with what we have. You will have a spectrum again of ideas. So I cannot have a single, I cannot throw in single numbers here.
Some stay the same and some reduce, he said. Didn't say anyone thinks they should increase.
For red meat. I don't advocate for red meat as such that I'm, telling the world that everybody has to eat meat. I think you can actually be perfectly healthy without consuming meat. It just is a matter of dietary robustness. Meat is a very valuable nutritional source, and you can be a lacto-ovo pesco vegetarian, or just a vegetarian, not an omnivore, not eating meat, and you will find your means to achieve nutritional adequacy without too much trouble. It's just that if you push human diets towards a degree of restriction of animal source foods, you complicate the task of getting properly nourished. And you complicate it especially in populations that have elevated needs for some reason, whether that's growing populations, developed populations, older adults, people with chronic disease whatsoever. They may need different types of solutions. So if Eat Lancet communicates to the planet that they want to have plant-rich diets, why would I be opposed to that? I think plants are as well very nutritious. That's absolutely not the issue. However, if they talk about modest red meat, we have to know that in reality, what they're really asking for, at least in the first report, there was 7 grams of beef. I think in the latest one, I haven't looked at it, so I didn't have the time. But I think they've put pork and beef together in one compartment, and now they have a window of 7 to 14 grams per day. Those are low amounts, and if we're going to prescribe them top down to global populations, because it's a planetary health diet for all of us, I think you may end up by creating issues in parts of the population. So advocating meat, what I'm really doing is saying that we should be careful when we vilify meat, because we're vilifying a very nutritious source of food, and we take it too much for granted that we can just replace it easily with other foods. We can, but it takes knowledge, it takes skill, it takes resources, and it depends a lot on the personal needs. I don't know if I answered all of your questions, but
yes, you did, and just to...
The main advice I gave to Herzon was to watch the time, because he's going to be able to ramble his way through it. We're at half an hour already. She's only spoken once.
Meat and dairy products weekly could indeed have an impact, especially in certain sections of population. I would now like to give the word to Dr. Iryna and ask if you see a role for livestock in society, and if so, in which terms? So do you believe that improvements to the current system are enough, or that reducing production is inevitable? I would also like to understand for you what is lacking in terms of research to meet these two needs, so as achieving stable nutrition levels, but also ensuring respect for biodiversity while cutting emissions.
Okay. Barbara, if I may go back to what Frederic said, because I want also to underline that things on which we're on the same plane. So it's not a debate on every single thing. So what I heard you saying, Frederic, is that you think that reducing meat consumption and, say, dairy also including, so animal-based food, is possible.
Contextually
because
possible.
Because the well-balanced diet can be achieved with a variety of, plant-based also sources, etc., and also animal-based
She's doing
food.
well getting clear
But reduction
concessions
is
then.
possible.
It's contextually possible, yes. It depends where you start from. I mean, so let me give you an example.
No,
For
he's going
instance,
to go off on a whole
there's
turn now.
information
This
coming
was
out
just
of
a setup
Australia
question.
where they
She's
find that very young children, toddlers, essentially have increasing rates of anemia because their parents are no longer giving them red meat because of understandable reasons,
She's going to go off on a whole
climate
turn now.
and so forth, the health messages. And we see increasing rates of anemia. We see increasing rates of anemia in female populations in the West.
Okay.
Interrupt.
The problem I have is when you give blanket blanket advice, reduce red meat. that's a very dangerous statement, because you may hit populations that are specifically receptive to these messages that are the most vulnerable ones. Some people will be as healthy with less meat than they have now, but it depends on your body, on your personal needs, which are biological to a certain part, but there may also be different reasons. So it's a contextual discussion.
Absolutely.
And so what I want to bring here with this,
oh my goodness,
with my publications, the Dublin Declaration, and all of that, is that we need more contextual discussions if we talk about changes in the system.
So we have vulnerable populations, young children, pregnant women, elderly people. So their consumption of meat probably should stay, what is healthy, and maybe in many cases even increased, as you say, if you exclude and not replace it with anything. Or there are vulnerable populations in the world that don't probably get even enough of proteins or other micronutrients. Fair enough. Now, with the planetary boundaries, of course, are global phenomena. So we have to work also on the global scale or then regional scale of what is then possible to achieve. So if we want to sustain certain dietary intake of animal-based products in some groups that have really need on it, or in regions that are not under receiving it, that are under receiving it, then the global sort of boundary evokes the need to reduce it elsewhere.
Yes.
If we have to stay within the boundaries, the limits.
Yes.
That's what the Eat Lancet basically calculates. So this is a just redistribution, what they evoke it. If we want everybody have nutritious diet, healthy diet, and also in the last version, they also calculate modest food costs. So the redistribution is important and the overall reduction is inevitable. Otherwise, we're not getting there.
But there's something important to understand about the Eat Lancet.
Oh, yeah, he's not going to give a clear response on that.
I think not even realized, but the Eat Lancet diet, the design of the Eat Lancet diet is not an environmental design. It is a nutritional design. It's coming from Walter Willett in Harvard. It has been designed based on health theory, not on environmental theory. It then has been matched against planetary boundaries and against those scenarios. Fair enough. And they make the statement that at least for a lot of those factors, it's actually fitting in. But the design hasn't been on environmental grounds. We could design other diets that have environmental effects that probably would be benign. The design as such, the way they talk about the specific categories and the specific amounts of food is coming from nutritional theory. So that's about Eat Lancet. We can take the discussion to other examples than Eat Lancet, where we have meat reduction. Now, then again, I think policy doesn't work like that, or reality doesn't work like this. It's not because you're going to eat less of a certain food in part of the world that it will increase in another part of the world. That's distribution economics. That's not how reality works.
But there's a limited total that we can eat.
Planning management system. Now, what we really need to do is to improve systems in places where the performance is low, the efficiency is low, where there's a lot of gains to be made because of innovation and because of better practices, and that will already bring us very, very far.
Mm-hmm. But one question, Dr. Frederic, but do you believe that it is possible, isn't there always a risk when you want to increase efficiency to stay stuck with highly intensive farms, which then have an impact both on environment and animal welfare? Won't we always be stuck there?
Not necessarily. I mean, that's probably where you will get divergent ideas within the Dublin community again. When Iryna before, she mentioned the fact that she said something like, we evoke the best practices and identify it with the way we operate. It's not what we're doing. What we're doing is setting the goal for the best practices. The best practices should be what we aim for. It is not what we're doing right now.
The majority is from factory farms.
Will that come with differences in production systems and affect the availability of animal source food? Well, it may as well be. But for me, one fundamental thing, if we talk about policy, is that we should shift away from putting the burden of responsibility on the individual, and we should put it on the system. We should absolutely build in hard red lines with respect to deforestation, water pollution, poor animal welfare. We build in
Those
those
red lines are
lines.
really being
We
surpassed.
incentivize the
Get
processes
'em,
that
Herzon.
bring in the pluses of biodiversity and so forth, and you will end up with a certain production output. And then that will imply that the levels of different foods will change. You will have probably changes from
He's
between
labouring a
ruminants
point that
and
he doesn't need to
monogastrics.
make.
You will have changes in the output levels overall of meat in certain areas compared to other areas. So all those things will move and change, but it's a different approach than asking the population to go to 7 grams of beef a day. That's a very different paradigm.
Yeah. Could I step in, Barbara?
Yes.
So there are several things here. I think we want to go back again.
Good.
I mean, planetary heat dance is one of the assessments that are based on how much we can actually produce and therefore how much we can afford eating.
I told her stay focused.
There are
don't get
several
distracted
other
by the
very
dish,
much, evidence-based synthesis that have been published before Eat Lancet and afterwards that say calculate what is possible to produce with best possible practices such as agroecological farming, organic farming, free-range farming, pastoral agriculture, monogastrics based on byproducts and wastes, etc. I haven't seen a single study of this kind that would say that we can either sustain the current level of production or consumption if we improve the systems this way, or certainly not increase them.
True.
Every single of them says that we have to indeed drastically reduce some of the production systems. Some of them may be more on ruminant side, some of them more on monogastric side, but that's the results we're getting. I don't want to cite how many in percentage, but some of them are quite considerable. So the evidence, the robust calculations, the numerical evidence, what is realistic within the biophysical boundaries is quite clear. And this is what not the Dublin Declaration gives its reader to understand. And this is where the problem lies.
Okay, so from what I understand from your point of view and also from what I read on your essays, you find that there is already enough scientific consensus to take action. But given the sensitivity of this topic, shouldn't there be also more evidence, for example, on what you mentioned, on could we keep same production levels within planetary boundaries with more sustainable systems? What I want to ask is to have a more common starting point to be able to take action in this sensitive topic, because otherwise it seems like we can't take, we really can take action. Don't you think that there should be more evidence on that side?
Absolutely, Barbara. Of course, we need more evidence, and quite urgently, and this is what we continue working on. Like I have a big academic funded project which tries to define what could be a sustainable niche for livestock in the country like Finland. So assuming that we use livestock for our food systems, how much and in what ways we have to do it. And the results are very similar. I mean, these are the same numbers, the same biophysical processes that we speak about. We need to improve on many levels, from the primary production of fields to the conversion rates of feed towards the output. And B, we have to reduce this. And what is very important, what evidence we come from, and there is just this year published a synthesis, like evidence synthesis of all modeling studies that we have so far. Ellen Roos was one, SLU was one of the major causes that concludes that the challenges are so big now on nutrients, on climate emission, on biodiversity, etc., that not single solution anymore is strong enough, effective enough to solve this. So the very big dietary change, greenhouse gas intensity, nutrient management, feed efficiency, crop productivity, all of it is needed. It's not anymore like one solution possible to achieve. And again, alternative protein sources, absolutely essential. Because what is happening, Barbara, again, is exactly what you're saying. The most of production increase happens from very intensive units of farming animals. It's not from pastoral systems. They're very minor. I mean, 10% only of all meat is produced from pasture systems, something like this. And only minor percentage of that is actually good for biodiversity, let's say, or sequester enough carbon to offset the emissions. So we're speaking of very, very small percentage of output that is kind of benign environmentally. The majority of it comes from like 20 store pig units in China or really big broiler production, also in the European Union. Finland is another good example. Yeah, that's where it comes. It's not agroecological systems.
Okay.
So what we say in our academic response again, that we need to both improve and downsize, and without downsizing we cannot improve.
Okay, that's an interesting message for our panel. I would like to move on a bit to the questions by our audience.
Oh,
and
yes,
one of the
Iryna.
questions.
Just add one little thing, Barbara, for the completeness of that interaction here. We do have. I mean, I fully agree that we need an entire toolbox to deal with the situation. I mean, we need to do many things at the same time. Also, interventions will not necessarily move the needle for all outputs in the right direction. Sometimes you have contradictory effects from one intervention may be good for something and bad for something else. So it's very complicated, and that's why we need all those scientific efforts. And now I'm fully with all of you that we have to build the scientific base and expand it. But I do have some concern about the suggestion that we have now reached a consensus and that the numbers are extremely clear. They're not really all that clear yet. Every modeling exercise comes with certain premises, comes with certain uncertainties, comes with certain built-in presuppositions, and there's a lot of possibilities, of a lot of options there that are still either not on the radar, have been neglected, have been ignored. You can have different scenarios that are both very productive and sustainable. You have sustainable intensification, but you have also extensive systems that can actually be upgraded. You have techniques like adaptive multi-paddock grazing, where you have quite high stocking rates that you have to move around that increase the output. So that there are ways of producing that are not always acknowledged very well in those kind of models, and they would require fundamental change. I agree, it's not going to be for tomorrow. They will need the incentives and so forth, but there are also options. And I think it's just it is moving science, and I'm not comfortable with the idea that we're saying we have reached the horizon here and we know how much we have to reduce and what we have to do. I think we need to kind of approach that system, that complicated food system, by
live chat here.
by bringing in the improvements that we can do, and we know a lot of things we can do. There are a lot of things we can do for biodiversity, which not necessarily going to
he's trying to run
compromise
down the clock.
productivity. But it would require fundamental steps and fundamental change.
If I can just ask one question, because there's one of the questions by our audience marries well precisely with what we are discussing here, and then I also have the opportunity to ask you this, Professor Frederic, because I already asked something similar to Dr. Iryna. So first question by Anna Jamieson says, I feel that by focusing so much on omitting red meat from the food system, scientists have missed working on many other aspects of increasing sustainability, especially within the livestock
She's ignoring my
sector.
questions.
What are your thoughts on this? Would you like to?
Yeah, well, it's kind of what I'm saying, that if the
That's just Freddie talking point.
Very often the red meat is used as the kind of symbolic item in the food on the plate that is carrying all of the weight, and as long as we reduce red meat, everything's going to be okay. That is certainly not the case. I think Iryna will certainly also agree with me on this. It's not, because every kind of part of that system, and it's there's an animal-plant binary that is often used here, as if all on the plant side is fine. We have many issues on the plant side as well. If we're going to take out lots of animal foods for reaching specific targets like Eat Lancet is producing, is proposing, well, we'll have to replace those foods, and we will have to replace them with plant systems. And okay, again, you can produce those plants in harmful and benign ways, but you have scaling problems there as well. there's a lot of optimism related to imitation animal foods. Well, people don't want them; they're not selling. People reject them. You have the lab foods; they are nowhere. They can't be scaled up. They're energy intensive. So there's an alternative side to the story as
we've
well.
We've looked at how these guys have been wrong about
neglected.
all the
take out the animal
source
food. It's easier said than done. You have to, and at the end also, okay, you have the environmental constraints, and we'll have to do our utter best to get to the best possible solutions. But there's a trade-off also with public health and adequate nutrition, and all those things have to be balanced well. Transitions are on there's an urgency, I agree, but transitions have to be carefully planned because if we're going to make very radical decisions at policy level by decimating herds or by moving people to red meat-free diets, well, it will come with consequences, like it or not.
Well, yeah, if I may, we're running out of time. I really want to go to the very core of why Dublin Declaration is so problematic, Frederic.
Yes.
There you write a scientific consensus that presents animal agriculture as a global problem that needs to be downsized rather than optimized. So this is where I think we need both. Do you agree on it?
Good, well, direct question.
For sure. I think we can both agree on that.
Okay. It also needs to be downsized.
Yeah. So the downsized part is something that I cannot put into numbers. I would not be able to predict based on the best of evidence to which degree we would need to downsize.
Keep pushing him.
Keep pushing him.
We have lots of models that show to what degree. Some of them are different. There is total vegan. There's some impact of meat. Total vegan is a useful reference point because then you can see whether adding animals is useful. And mostly we do see that they're useful to a certain degree. And then these figures exist. But I really want to see whether we are on the same plane, that we have no choice but also downsized the system that we created at the moment.
Will give a straight
to be clear, I'm not in principle blocking off downsizing myself personally. Again, I'm not talking for the Dublin Consortium. I think that very likely downsizing will be a result of introducing the boundaries of the playfield, right? But I don't find it productive to come up with a number which is mostly artificial, based on model approaches that can be heavily discussed in many cases. You can say that you're convinced of them. That's where probably we'll have to end in disagreement. But I think that if you
so would, yes, he said yes, we need
set
to downsize
those boundaries. I'm expecting that yes, you would probably have a downsize effect.
Yes,
in the system.
Excellent.
But I'm not comfortable, and I'm talking for myself.
Leroy says we need to decrease life to stop
declaration consortium. From my perspective, I don't think it's helpful to come up with a specific target that is coming from a certain model study that I think needs broader discussions, needs deeper, needs more evidence, needs more debate before we take different stances.
I want to make him clarify. Just say yes, so to be clear, we do need.
Sorry, ask some, because we have to also answer some of the questions by your audience.
That was good, Herzon.
And I'd like to have a question to Dr. Iryna. So there's a question saying, you tend to focus on ruminants for monogastrics and per kilo of meat produced. Agroecological systems have very low performance, especially on GHG emissions, and the benefits they have on biodiversity and animal welfare are largely offset by the big loss in the GHG emissions. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, perfectly correct. This is what it is. You can have a very efficient system like monogastrics, but then you lose on all those benefits. For example, biodiversity, because it's always negative through the feed production. So yeah, you can't have both here. And that's a very big difficulty.
That's a great concept. I can't believe you said that.
We already have 30% or 70% of all avian biomass apparently is by poultry. So 30% is wild birds. For ruminants, it's even worse. 30% is estimated to be just domesticated livestock, where 7% is wild animals, mammal animals. This is the world that is there on the plate now. And but I want to go back, Frederic, because this is the paper that you published on Dublin Declaration in Nature, and there you cite yourself and your colleague Ederer expanding animal production output is the most readily available way to nourish the world sufficiently in the future.
Goodness.
And this is where I had to step in and ask
He
my
looks like a
colleagues
naughty
to
schoolboy who's been
prepare
caught.
a rebuttal in an academic journal. And this is what is 5 other academic pieces arguing with. And this is where I want to be very, very clear.
Right. Okay.
Man, she is nailing
what it's really saying is that in cases where we have serious problems of food security and nutrient security, expanding livestock is the best way we have to deal with those kind of situations. That's what it's really saying. It's not saying to expand livestock agriculture in Belgium. The purpose, the underlying meaning here is that it's one of the best tools we have currently to fix issues with undernourishment, malnourishment, and that's where the benefit of livestock is. It's a readily available technology, if you want, that has been mobilized over
I can't believe how
over
well she's
millennia. We have been using animals to improve food security situations.
Yeah. Okay, so what again we're bringing is the context. So
yeah,
in
absolutely.
some places of the world we can increase it somewhat because the limitations of land and water are very tight in the places where people actually need to eat more calories or micronutrients. But expansion is just not physically possible. And the only way forward is a reduction. And how much in percentage we need to reduce, we leave to the modeling research and numerical studies, because the Dublin Declaration is a very beautiful piece of work. It's very well written and it says sends very optimistic, very nice picture. No wonder many of my colleagues also signed it, because these are people who really like working with livestock. They see the value of them. And so from that bubble of liking livestock, it's easy to sign the declaration. But then the whole picture of what is realistic to achieve with agroecological methods or for low-income countries is missed entirely in this declaration. That's why I think it's so unbalanced, unfortunately. And my question next to you is: there is anything we can do together in order to balance it a bit more? Because, yeah, as I write in my essay, most of people who signed the Dublin Declaration are indeed coming from livestock industry, which doesn't mean that they are bribed by the industry. That's not for me to decide. What I'm saying that it's a bubble. It's like, aeronautic engineer loves an airplane and may not see the impact of 100,000 flights that are being done daily.
I think the point we made that, or the question you asked of what can we do to reach a more common ground is important. And I would like to give the word to Professor Frederic, if you'd like
Last
to
3 minutes might
answer.
be nice and tidy up.
And then we will soon have to wrap up.
Yeah. Well, I think it becomes clear from the conversation that we do have things in common. Absolutely. I mean, we both believe in the value of animals. We have different opinions of how much animals we need, most likely.
There are some great points in this debate.
We do also believe in the value of agroecological, agroecological benefits. We do believe in the complexity and the contextuality of things. So these are common grounds we can start from. Actually, the Dublin Declaration is not a modeling study. It is not even a study. It is just a warning against vilification of livestock, which we do see appearing. We do see it appearing in media. We do see it appearing in scientific literature, and we do see it appearing in sometimes in policy. It's a warning against anti-livestock sentiment. It doesn't take any position as such on herd sizes. It doesn't take any position as such on the ideal consumption patterns, the amount of red meat. It's completely agnostic about all of those things.
It does, because
so that's never been the purpose of the declaration. It is just a warning. Be careful, you policymaker, if you start deciding about livestock's future, be careful that you also listen to the work that is being done to make livestock systems better, more sustainable, and factor them in your discussion. That's what the declaration really is doing. For the rest, it is not a scientific study. It's not up to the declaration to give numbers and to decide upon the herd sizes or anything else. So within that framework, I think there's perfectly place for someone like Dr. Herzon as well to find a position and contribute to that evolving discussion on what the global mosaic, because it has to be a mosaic. And we talk again, if we talk about cutting herds, well, you may need to cut in some parts of the herds in some places of the world with some production systems, but you will probably have to upscale some other parts of the herds where you need them and where the beneficial effects are to be seen. So it's a very complicated moving picture, and it will need all of us to come to the best solution. And the best solution, I strongly believe in the scientific contrasts you have to create to find that good solution. That's why I think we always have to finish here. But,
Yeah, Frederic, I agree with you.
finish.
It's not a scientific piece of writing. Absolutely, it's more of a pamphlet, but it does send a message, very strong message, and it's confirmed by an independent research published just this year that it sends a message: reducing animal consumption and production is not necessary or even helpful to sufficiently limit the environmental impact, and that's a wrong message that it's sending.
But that's not our
This
message.
is
Where do you
where
see that
the
message?
worry is. And it's not balanced in this terms of evidence it presents, because the evidence is also about the reduction as a necessity.
Dr. Iryna, Dr. Frederic, we would like to conclude on a more constructive note. So it became clear that there's common ground, but there's still also some challenges to make you to bring some more consensus, at least because today we also wanted to move a bit
Herzon did
forward,
really well
so
here.
not be too much stuck in the declaration and the rebuttals, etc. So we
much
want
better
to
than I
bring more insights
feared.
to our audience, and I think for that the panel was definitely interesting. So I think we saw some common ground, as both
they didn't ask
sides
any of my
are
questions.
open to some reduction to more plant-based diets, but also acknowledging that science is still missing, that the way to improve farming is still missing, and also that scientific evidence there is needed, and that more focus should also be there in order for us to generate more consensus and to finally act on these very important issues. I think both of you also agree that a diversified toolbox is important, so not one solution fits all. I think both of you can agree to this. And there's still many challenges ahead, and I think that the debate and future debates can bring more consensus, hopefully, and finally that we can move forward towards a solution. And thank you very much for being here today with us and for your valuable insights. And I wish both of you a great day, and also to our audience, I hope everyone enjoyed. People are reacting positively, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Pathway, for hosting us, and good luck in your research.
Thank you both. Have a good day.
You too.
Woof. Oh, how about that? I think that was really good. I think that was really, really good. I was kind of nervous that Herzon would be a bit too polite and not really go hard, and also would get distracted by gish gallops and sort of lose the point and stuff like that. But she did really, really well. There was several times where she brought him back to say, you haven't answered the question here, and there was even one or two times where he laughed our sort of an admission that, oh, you've got me, Ray. I was trying to worm away from this, but you've got me. When she pushed him for a clear declaration that we need to reduce meat consumption, man, he did not want to say that. He did not want to say that. He's on the record now saying that. And that Herzon's done really well to set up the discussion to that point, to where he had to give it, and then he kind of tried to talk around it and get lost in the nuance and stuff, And that is the only point where she interrupted. There's lots of points where she looked like she wanted to interrupt him. That was the only point where she interrupted and said, come back, do we need to reduce meat consumption overall, right? And he said yes. He said, yes, overall production's going to go down. And I have not heard him say that before. So that's a really fantastic concession to extract. Man, that went better than I would have hoped. Oh, that was good stuff. Let's do a little bit of Fast Action Network. And then I have to go and do a normal working day. I'm used to streaming in the evenings so that I'm kind of done afterwards, but this debate was in the morning, so I thought I'd better catch it. Yeah, it was really, really good, but how many people will see this? Super Bowl weekend is coming up down here. Yeah, I'm going to publicize that a bit, and I'm glad to have streamed it and I'll have it on my channel and be able to share it. It did say in the Zoom meeting that it's being recorded, but you know, God knows if and when that'll become publicly available. But this was really fantastic. I'm definitely I'll upload the video of that. I will share that far and wide, and in particular, my favorite part was the clip where Freddie says, yes, overall production needs to downsize. Oh, goodness me. Herzon did really well, I have to say. I was frustrated that Freddie had agreed to debate somebody else, essentially, because I thought I trust myself to hold his feet to the fire, and I know that often when you're dealing with people like this, that needs to be done in almost like a norm violating, slightly impolite way, where you need to interrupt them and say, hold on, you didn't answer the question, you need to come back, right? In this kind of polite academic circumstance, you could see people in the chat saying, oh, it's great that this was so civil. You need to be extremely polite, right? And so my fear was that that would be enough to allow Freddie to keep it extremely vague and not be held to account for anything that he was actually saying. But that wasn't the case, so I was pleased to see it. Herzon did a really good job of bringing him back several times, of focusing on what is important. She was well prepared. She had the Dublin Declaration printed out there that she was reading from, the Nature Food version. So she did really well. She did really, really well. And I think I think that she got two big wins here, which one of them is having Freddie say, or at least two, right? I'll no doubt I'll watch this back and do some more sort of stop and start analysis of each part. It's quite difficult reacting live, so I couldn't pause it or anything like that. But she got Freddie saying overall production needs to decrease for meat, which I did not expect to hear him say that today. That is real progress, and I honestly can't believe that she got that out of him, to be honest. So that's really encouraging. And also, as well as getting a clear concession on that point, there was also several points where he didn't want to answer the question and looked weaselly and changed the subject and so on. So double win, really. I often find in a debate, usually you'll get one or the other, right? You'll either have people giving you the concession that you want, or looking Weasley when they talk around whilst not giving you the concession that you want. And in this case, we kind of got both. So, yeah, I mean, gotta be happy with that outcome. Freddie did not seem well prepared for that debate, I have to say. His talking points really haven't changed since the videos that we were watching of him the other day. Like saying that it's balanced, for example. He had slides and everything. Herzon didn't have slides, which I feel like is also kind of a relative mogging. 2 of 1 when the other guy's got slides and you don't. She did have the paper printed out, which I appreciated. That was some good boomer debate prep energy. Print out the paper. I would never think to do that. But that shows great preparation, to be fair. I mean, yeah, hopefully I never have to print something out again, because it's invariably a nightmare to do so. Comfort in and Sweets Puerto Rico. Oh, yeah, we can find this one the other day as well. Okay, can't find that one, so I'm going to leave it. Oh, that is... Yeah, we've completed it again. We've completed it again. We've completed Fast Action Network again, guys. It's Choice Hotels and Radisson at the moment. And I got an email last night, actually, saying that there had been another, I believe, relatively minor victory on Fast Action Network. Let's have a look. It was a hotel chain, I'm pretty sure. I don't want to say the wrong one and give them give them credit unduly. Is it this? Yes. Best Western Hotels has been ignoring the bulk of our accountability inquiries into their cage-free commitment progress for 6 years. But it's finally crumbling under the relentless pressure you put on the corporation. Best Western has reported considerable progress, including increasing cage-free sourcing from 40% to 70% in Asia and Latin America, and a global sourcing figure for the first time ever of 70%. So we're keeping an eye on them for the next several months to see if that steady progress toward freeing hens from cages continues. Oh, that is awesome. Best Western, that's another big campaign that we've been hitting on here, right? We've been doing lots of Best Western emails and social media posting. And for a long time, they were ignoring the campaign, and now they've finally, for the first time ever, given a global cage-free egg sourcing figure of 70%. And they've reported progress in Asia and Latin America. We were posting a load of hotels in Asia for Best Western. So good, another victory on Fast Action Network there. Nothing but dubs today, guys. I think a pretty clear Iryna Herzon victory in this debate this morning. Way better than I dared to hope. And another victory on Fast Action Network. Ah, no complaints at all this morning. No complaints at all. I'm looking forward to watching the recorded version of this debate so that we can go through it in more detail. But man, I really enjoyed that. Herzon really understood the assignment, I would say. I emailed her a little bit in advance, and the main advice that I gave was keep an eye on the time, don't let him ramble, don't get distracted. An hour's going to go quicker than you think. Nail the main points. And she did a fantastic job of that. It's very easy advice to give, but it's so easy not to do. When he starts rambling off about 100 different things, you're going to hear 50 different things that you want to go after and you've got a good response to. And you have to resist that temptation and say, well, hold on. The main point here was a clear question about whether overall livestock numbers need to reduce. And she went back to that, and she went back to that, and eventually she got the concession. He says yes. He says in such a roundabout, rambling way, but he says yes. Overall livestock needs to reduce. That was excellent. Man. There's for how long has Frederic Leroy avoided chrisbryant.com. If anyone needs that information. Coming up on 11 months now. Maybe I'll do something for the 1-year anniversary. I feel very satisfied with that outcome. Well done, Herzon. Well, guys, I'm going to call it there. I'm going to go and have a day of work now. It's going to be hard to come down from the excitement of this, honestly. I'm very satisfied with the outcome of this. I think Herzon did a fantastic job. Just the right amount of aggressive for me, right? She looked assertive. She would not be knocked off the point. But she also came into it, I think she was very sympathetic. She was very easy to like in this debate. And that's important as well. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Tone. I appreciate you. Let's think. I have a good interview to record on Monday. I'll probably record that rather than stream it, though. Next Tuesday will be the 14th, and I'll be speaking to Ask Yourself in the evening. We were supposed to talk this week, but man forgot about me. Never mind, not bitter about that. But we'll be speaking to Ask Yourself on Tuesday night, so Tuesday 14th will be the next stream. Most likely. I may do one before then, but we'll see. So yeah, look after yourselves, guys. Thanks you again for tuning in. And I'll definitely, if the recording of this debate becomes available, I'll definitely watch the recording. Yeah, well done, Herzon. Top marks. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you all soon. Cheers.